Ladies and gentlemen, I am Yusril. The game is World of Warships. It is the 4th of August 2018, and yes, the date matters because we're on the test server today. This is Le Terrible, the upcoming and still very, very work in progress French Premium Tier 8. Well, the game calls her a destroyer. I'm going to call her a destroyer for much of the video, purely for convenience's sake, but the actual classification got a little bit more complicated than that over the course of the war. In any event, Le Terrible was part of the Le Fantasque line of destroyer-ish boats. She was laid down in 1931, launched in 1933, and during her trials in 1935 set the world speed record for a destroyer-ish boat of 45.1 knots. During the Second World War, she began with the Forster Raid, and on the 25th of October 1939, along with her sister, Le Fantasque, Le Terrible captured the German cargo ship Santa Fe. With the fall of France in June 1940, she became part of the Vichy regime's fleet, and as such she was at Mers-el-Kébir on the 3rd of July 1940, when the British launched their attack there. She actually managed to escape the harbour and engage the British fleet, and attempted torpedo runs, but was recalled to provide escort for the French battleship Strasbourg as it made the run to safety at Toulon. Le Terrible also took part in the Battle of Dakar. That particular farce occurred in September 1940, and shortly after the events of Operation Torch, French West Africa and its fleet, which at the time included Le Terrible, rejoined the Allies. In March 1943, she was refitted and modernised in Boston, including the attachment of radars, a sonar system, and various other improvements, including beefed-up flak. After which she went back to the Mediterranean and the Adriatic, and along with her sisters, Le Fantasque and Le Malin, spent the next 18 months or so raising Cain among German and Axis convoys. She also took part in the Allied invasion of Italy, the Allied invasion of southern France, Operation Dragoon, and her war came to an abrupt end in December of 1944 when she was in a collision with her sister ship Le Malin, which put her under heavy repair until 1945, essentially taking her out of the Second World War. Post-war, she was put in reserve and classified as a swift escort. She provided escort cover for Lafayette, Bois-Belleau and Arromanches, the French carriers, at various points. In 1956 she became a training ship, and she was finally scrapped after almost 30 years of service in 1962. Quite the career for a 1930s boat. So I've mentioned several times that she wasn't really a destroyer. The Marine Nationale in the 1930s and 1920s didn't have destroyers per se in their order of battle. What they did have were the Torpilleur d'Escadre, the squadron torpedo boats. These were similar to the likes of T-22 and T-61. They were reasonably heavy boats, 1,000 to 1,500 tons, and they were intended to make torpedo attacks on enemy cruisers and heavier during fleet battles. Most nations would still have classed these as destroyers. They also had ships like Le Terrible, Le Fantasque, Le Malin, etc., the contre-torpilleurs, that were basically designed to hunt down and kill the equivalent of the Torpilleur d'Escadre before they could make their attack runs. The French built these contre-torpilleurs large, they built them fast, and they built them fairly well armed. To give you some perspective here, in her refit at Boston in 1943, she was actually classified as a light cruiser, just to bring her into line with the rest of the Allied fleets. For further perspective, in 1931, when she was laid down, the Americans were thinking about restarting destroyer production. They got round to that in 1932 with the laying down of the Farragut and Porter's classes of destroyers. The Farraguts came in at 1,360 tons. The Porters were 1,850. Le Terrible displaces 2,570 tons at her standard load and just breaks 3,000 at full load. The gearings are only about 2% heavier than her, and the Americans wouldn't build anything significantly heavier until 1949 with the Mitcher class of destroyers, and even those were experimental boats. So what does all of this give us in terms of World of Warships? Well, for a start, a lot of health. She has 18,600 health points. The only ships that beat her in terms of raw health are the Z-23 with 19,005 and the Akazuki with 20,400. Once you add on Survival Expert, things get a little bit muddier. They go up to 21,400 health, and things get positively confused when you consider the USS Kidd. She only has 16,007 out of the box, but she also has a repair party, and if she gets the chance to make full use of that, Kidd is still the toughest Tier 8 destroyer going. Armour, of course, well, it's a destroyer, allegedly, so 6 to 20 millimeters of plate at best. The artillery is the 139 L50 rifle of 1929. This is an improved version, well, allegedly improved version of the Eigler's L40 rifles. You get more muzzle velocity, 800 meters a second on the AP, 840 on the high explosive. Bear in mind the Russian railguns do 870 meters out of the barrels, so yeah. Almost Russian-grade gunnery, maybe. It depends on the shell's drag factor. The catch is that where Eigler reloads in 4.5 seconds, and things like the US 5-inch reload in 5, this reloads in 7, so she's not going to win any DPM contests. However, she is a 139mm rifle, so it does still benefit from basic and advanced firing training, so that kinda helps with the fire rate. It also helps with the range. 11.2 kilometers is workable, but with this ship's probable playstyle, it's gonna help to have the extra reach of advanced firing training, especially if the ballistics, and in particular the drag coefficient, are as good as the Russian shells. Torpedoes are interesting. She has 9 tubes, but she's got the Mahan style of tube layout, so the forward tubes are on either side. It's only the rear launcher that's on the centre line. And the firing arcs, well, they're a bit of a mixed bag. It looks like the forward launchers will be pretty decent. I mean, you can see the forward tubes at a good 15 to 20 degrees off the bow. I suspect for safe launching, you'll want to avoid the foxhole break. So we're probably looking at about a 30 degree, maybe 40 degree off the bow limit for the forward tubes. The rear tubes, I'm sorry to say, are British grade bad. You can basically forget forward launching with those between the boats and the midsection deck house. However, this does open up some possibilities. If you start broadside onto a target, you can dump 6, do a turn, and then dump another 3 to follow on. Or what you could do is a rolling attack. Start on the port or starboard 4 quarters, dump 3, turn, dump another 3, keep turning, dump the final 3, and then turn away into your escape manoeuvre. So I suspect those are going to be the 2 principal torpedo attacks that we'll see from this ship. The torpedoes themselves are, well, they're pretty average, to be honest. 15,000 damage isn't brilliant at tier 8. 90-second reload is tolerable for a triple launcher, but again, the Japanese have heavier hitting torpedoes with a similar reload, so average, maybe shading down to the bad end of average at first glance. 9-kilometer range is very nice, thank you, that's perfectly workable. And a speed of 60 knots is, again, not brilliant, but nothing to complain about either. Her flak is a bad joke. This is prior to her refit in 1943, so she's got a few 50 cal machine guns and a couple of 37mm autocannon. 5 DPS on there, 2 DPS on the long range, and then the rest are just a bad joke. Okay, it's not a Sashio grade awful. The only redeeming feature about these at the moment is that the maximum fire range of 3 kilometers, maybe going up to 3.3 or 3.6, depending on your build, is at least less terrible and less awful than some, and more to the point, is shorter than her air detection range, so at least if you forget to turn the flak off, you're not going to accidentally blow your position. Where Le Terrible really stands out, however, is her manoeuvrability. As mentioned, she was historically the fastest destroyer ever, and Wargaming are reflecting that. Out of the box, she does 43 knots. Fit a Sierra Mike, and she'll get up to her record trial speed of 45.1. Slap on her engine boost, and it gets a little bit silly, because her engine boost is the plus 20% that Igla enjoys as well, rather than the standard plus 8%. So fire up everything, Sierra Mike and engine boost, and you'll be off to Plaid. Or in this case, 54 knots if I've done my sums correctly. Turning circle radius of 690 metres is frankly good considering her top speed. This thing is going to turn extremely quickly. The rudder shift can be got down to 3.4 seconds. As standard it's 4.1 give or take, maybe 4.3. So reasonable, especially if you have the rudder shift mod on her. But unfortunately she pays for this with her stealth. Full ninja, she gets 7.1 kilometers surface detection, 3.7 on the air. However, out of the box that is 8.8. This is tier 8. For comparison, the Kiev is 9 kilometers out of the box, so Le Terrible is not bottom of the barrel, just. However, this is a tier where you've got Asashio, Kaguro and Harakaze running around at 5.4, Lightning's 5.5, Benson is 5.8, I believe Xianyang is 5.7, possibly 5.8, Loyang's 5.7, 5.8, and even Ognivoy is a 6.1 kilometer detection radius. So Le Terrible, Kiev, yeah. These are very much the high-speed evasion tanking pseudo-light cruiser ships that we're used to with the Russians. We kind of got a taste of it with Igla. We saw that this was going to be the French destroyer style, at least while we've only got the contre-torpilleurs in game. Of course, the torpille d'escadre will take a more traditional approach to battle if we ever get those. But overall, I think what we've got here is another French boat that is going to, well, out-Russian the Russians. A lot depends on her guns. Bearing in mind that these have got very similar muzzle velocities to the Russians, I think she's going to be much more workable in that high-speed gunboat role than the Igla, who only had the L40 guns and only had a muzzle velocity of 700 meters a second. Beyond that, there's not a lot I can say in this, except possibly to go and console Shimakaze in whatever corner she's curled up into in a fit of jealous rage. Until then, ladies and gentlemen, and until we actually get to take this thing into battle, there's not a lot to add, so I will see you next time. Farewell.